I didn't mind dying. I wasn't afraid of dying, and I expected to die. But the thing that really bothered me was my parents. I know it was going to be a particular blow to them. It would have been something terrible. And that's what I worried about all the time, about dying. But as far as dying in itself, it didn't bother me. I expected to. But I was lucky, and it was, as I like to emphasize again, it was all luck. Survival was 100% luck.
The first sortie by bombers of a Canadian squadron took place on the night of June 12, 1941. 1 year later, 68 Royal Canadian Air Force two-engine bombers took part in the first 1,000 bomber raid. During the war, bombing raids steadily intensified, battering the industrial cities of Germany, U-boat bases, and railway centers from Norway to France. Bomber Command had the highest percentage of Canadian personnel killed in the Second World War.
Pilots, navigators, bomb aimers, wireless air gunners, and gunners were all in little groups. Well, our pilot went over and he picked out a navigator, and he told the navigator, he says, now you go pick the rest of the crew.
Some people went for religion. If you were religious, you got talking to other people that were religious too, and you crewed up. Other people were drinkers, which included me and all my crew, but we didn't drink to excess, of course, but you walked around with a big stein of beer in your hand and I knew you were a drinker. And I look back and see how we relied on them. Each person, you had to rely on the other person. And a crew was a crew, and if one was lax, you never survived.
They become like a family. And believe me, each one of us would consider the other one much closer than I would consider my brother.
So you really flew a Lancaster?
I still do, with the crew.
Speaking of crews, I guess it really was important that you got all the right personalities together. What if you were the odd man out?
What are you getting at?
Like, if you had to hook up with a crew that didn't drink and you did, or weren't religious and you were, wouldn't you feel like an outsider?
Up there, every crew's only as strong as its weakest link. Everyone has to have each other's back or things go bad, quick.
And what if a crew member doesn't pull his own weight?
You take him aside and you tell him what's what. If he doesn't start pulling his weight, you set him straight until he does.
You would even go as far as singling him out?
Yeah, whatever it takes.
No, that's so wrong.
Wrong? Let me tell you what's wrong, Andy. It's worrying about people's feelings when it's my life and the crew's on the line.
We used to get the bacon and eggs before we took over. And in those days, that was a big deal because in England, everything was rationed. So I always considered that like being my last meal, before, before its execution.
We went from the breakfast down to the briefing room. Once everyone's in, they close the doors, lock the doors. And there's a big screen which is covered. The commanding officer of the squadron walks in.
And he would pull the curtain, and there was your route marked on a tape. And if it was a tough route, you'd hear all kinds of sighs and cries out from these guys. And if it was an easy route on the coast, you didn't have far to go, everybody would be quite happy.
What if you thought the mission was unsafe? Could you refuse to go?
Refuse an order? This is war, Andy. It's not like not doing your homework when you're told to, or when you're on the job where if you don't do what the boss tells you, you get fired. Here, not following orders can get you court-martialed, even imprisoned. You fly the damn sorties.
Inside, it's quite cold because you're at 20,000 feet and the temperature is really frigid up there. So we used to have a big pipe, like you'd have in a dryer, a flexible pipe that come down, and it was attached to one of the engines, and it'd blow heat down into the nose where we were. And because you're working with your bare hands, and it's pretty hard to work if they're really cold and you're trying to work a handheld computer. Way back at the back was the tail gunner, and he had an electrically heated suit because it was pretty cold sitting out there.
I was a tail gunner, and it was so cold. The temperature was minus 40 to minus 60 degrees at that. And I wore all this clothing. I wore stockings up to my thigh, turtleneck sweater, my battle dress suit, then an electrically heated suit, and it had slippers and gloves. Then I put on a big suit. It was quilted over the top of that. Then I put my flying suit on. Then I put my parachute suit on.
Did you ever lose focus, being that cold for such long stretches of time?
I'd be lying to you if I said no. But what you have to understand is things can get pretty routine, sortie after sortie. But then the world can get turned upside down at a moment's notice. Then you don't feel a thing. You just react to the threats.
I hated searchlights. I was scared of searchlights. Everybody had certain things that they were afraid of. Fighters was another thing. Flak was another thing. But we got coned one time. Usually if you got coned with searchlights, you didn't get out of the cone. They used to hose pipe the flak right up the cone, and that was the end of you. If they never hose piped it up, that meant it was fighters there. And it was just a matter of a minute or so before a fighter got you. You were completely blinded. It's hard to imagine just how bright it was, but we tried everything to get out of the cone. We dove, we climbed, we slipped here and there. So finally the skipper stopped, and he slipped sideways. And he slipped right over another aircraft that was underneath, and we didn't see the other aircraft. But all of a sudden, we were bright, and it was complete darkness. And guess where the searchlights were? They were on the aircraft underneath us. And it was shot down within seconds. And I was never so happy seeing getting out of the cone, and 7 guys all going down to their death right away, and I couldn't believe how I felt so good that these 7 guys were dying instead of us. So,
How do you wrap your head around that?
I don't understand. Why would you wrap your head around anything?
No, you don't get it. I mean, seeing your buddies, guys you fly with, get killed because you moved your plane out of the searchlight and put them in the cone's bullseye.
That's part of the fog of war, Andy. We're all just trying to survive up there and complete our sorties. And in order to do that, we often, like I said, have to react instantly to the threat. Then, it's the luck of the draw. Any skipper could do that to me, and I wouldn't think any less of him. If I survive, that is.
Well, flak is another name for, I guess a slang expression you might say, for anti-aircraft fire. And the Germans had a lot of anti-aircraft guns around cities that they're likely to be bombed. And when it came up, you'd see a big black burst, you know, like a black cloud.
you'd be full of holes. See, these 88 would burst. They were shooting at you, but they didn't have to hit you as long as they burst close to you. It was a shell, and the shrapnel would go through your aircraft. And if it never hit a vital spot, you were fine. If it never hit you, you were fine. My skipper, he used to call everybody up individually. He'd call them up every 15 or 20 minutes to see if they were still alive. And if he never got an answer, he'd send somebody back to, usually the wireless operator, send them back to check on you, and he'd come back and say that you were dead or you were wounded or something, with flak that had come through the aircraft. And a funny thing happened to me one time. There was a big hole came through my turret, and it was about the size of my fist. And it went in the bridge of my nose and took all the skin off, but it never bled or anything. And I wanted this piece for a souvenir.
Our trip was a night trip, and that is actually scary because it's awful dark out there and you're going through clouds. You don't know how close the other aircraft is to you. There are collisions between aircraft.
On one of the last trips, there was 3 mid-air collisions, so that meant 6 crews. So, and the planes that collide, they would just be going down, there'd be a wing and part of a fuselage, and when a plane starts to spin like that, you can't get out because of the force of the spin, you know. So they lost a lot of, I think most of the guys died that were in the airplanes, and out of all the losses that day, there was 7 aircraft lost and 6 of them were by collision.
And there was 2 aircraft directly in front of us, and they collided. I don't know what happened. They must have hit a slipstream or something. And there was 7 or 8 chutes came out, and one guy waved to me. He went right by me in a chute and waved to me, and I waved back, and they went down on the water just before, in the North Sea, just before we reached the island. And I was working with a fellow one time, quite a few years later, and I was telling him about this. And I said, I often wonder what happened to those guys. And he said, well, I can tell you. He says, I was on their squadron. They were both in the same squadron. And he said they were picked up within 20 minutes, and they were all dead from exposure to the cold water.
How could you hit each other in something as big as the sky?
You think it wouldn't be possible, but it is. You see, we fly in a tight formation so the enemy fighters can't pick us off. Strength in numbers. Hundreds of Lanks heading towards the same point, the same sortie, wave after wave. Lots of traffic, lots of chop. Accidents are bound to happen. They happen in every sortie. Can't get away from it.
You make it sound like it's a little fender bender where nobody gets hurt. But you're talking about wiping out entire crews, planes, everything.
Biting the dust is a risk we all take every time out. But the enemy has to be hit hard, over and over. Aircraft and crews can be replaced. We do what we have to do to win this war. And then maybe no one else has to die.
The engineer goes out of his seat and stands behind the pilot looking out at the Astrodome, which is a dome above the aircraft there where the navigator takes astro shots. Now, the reason he goes there is to watch out for aircraft above who may have their bomb bay doors open. If an aircraft above you has its bomb doors open, you better get out of the way in a hurry because you get a load of bombs on you.
They were over the target, and the bomb aimers were on the bombing run. And the bomb aimer is saying, uh-oh, there's another aircraft right under us. So we told the pilot, go left, or go to the port side. So we went to the port side. The guys below are looking up, and they go to the port side. So we switch over to the other side. They switch over to the other side. They're a lot more nervous than we were. And this was going back and forth. Finally, we both went the opposite way, so we went on and dropped our bombs. Anyways, when we got back to interrogation afterwards, and our bomb aimer got talking to his brother, who was a pilot of another aircraft on the squadron. Guess who was the pilot of that aircraft that was underneath us? His brother. So good thing he didn't drop his bombs right then. And sometimes you'd see a picture of when the bombs were dropped, and there'd be an aircraft right in the center of it.
So let me see if I got this right. Not only did you have to worry about the enemy shooting you down from the ground and from the air, you also had to dodge your own planes from colliding with you. And to top it off, you had to worry about bombs being dropped from above by your own planes?
You're a smart egg there, Andy. It's called friendly fire. It's never on purpose, and you pray to God it doesn't happen to you, but happens in every war.
And how would you feel if you dropped one of your own bombs on your own aircraft?
I felt bad, but you go on. It's part of war. You have to keep fighting. There's no choice.
It's always a choice.
Oh yeah, Cadet. What war have you fought in?
The Germans used to put factories where they were building aircraft and trucks and armament right in the center of cities. And if you weren't right on the target, you dropped it on a big hotel or something right close to it.
As you are approaching the target, the bomb aimer pretty well takes over control of the aircraft. He's lying down on his stomach, watching out visually at the target. And he tells the pilot to go a bit left, a little bit right, a little bit left, a little bit right. And finally he says steady. And when he says steady, the next thing is he presses the button, the bombs are gone.
Each airplane has a map, a bomb aimer, and with his watch. And he's supposed to deal with the navigator to get over the target exactly at the time. So over the target, you're looking down, you're all set the bomb, you look up, another airplane just above you with his bomb doors open. So a bomb aimer tells you, hold it, hold it, hold it. I said, no, to hell, we'll move over. He lets go of the bombs. We missed the target by miles, I guess, but we missed those bombs coming down too. The idea that you're bang on target, no possible. But every time you had a camera in your airplane, it'd take a picture of your bombs landing. My bombs that day, there were no. The target was over there to the left, and the bombs were over to the right. So you can't believe the pictures you see, because I'm not the only one.
That's insane. Just randomly dropping your bombs off target?
Do the best we can with what we've got. Our technology is getting better all the time. We have pathfinders and radar and navigation systems. We're getting more accurate at hitting targets. But sometimes still, it's like dropping a coin in a wishing well. You know how the ripples spread out when the coin hits the water? That's like our bombs. Eventually we hit the target. And when we miss, civilians die. They die in every war. The greater the war, the more civilians die. It's plain and simple.
What? It shouldn't be plain and simple when it comes to civilians dying.
Imagine 100 Lancaster bombers all in one level flying and all of them releasing their bombs at the same time. It's just nothing left down below.
At first it wasn't so bad, but then it was every night and every night. They always came during the night. So that was the beginning, and then it became worse and worse and worse. Well, we were sitting there in the basement, and we listened. And when we heard the bombs and the planes coming closer, you know, my mother was sitting beside me, and she was kind of shaky, and I was taking her arm. And it was not nice. You know what? When I meet a girl from London, I feel she lived through the same thing as I did. She understands me, and I understand her.
I was in London when they bombed the docks, and at that time, they came over in the afternoon, and they set the Surrey docks on fire, and they came back at night, and they finished it off. You could see the flames from everywhere. And in those days, most people, ordinary people, didn't have telephones. So you couldn't get in touch with your office. So when you got to your office, the only way you knew that people had had a bad night was they just weren't there. And the empty desk was there. And I think that was the most horrific part of it, because you didn't know what had happened to the people. You know, sometimes they turned up, but sometimes they didn't.
Their mission was clear. just flatten the cities. Yes, there were military targets, yes, etc., etc. But they went to demolish, destroy German cities and the population.
See, a lot of people blamed or accused Bomber Command of bombing civilians. And of course we did. We bombed what we called, bomb everything. But in war, you bomb what you have to and you do what you're told.
How do you live with the knowledge that you probably killed civilians?
Remember, it's the Jerrys who started it.
But does that make it right?
Listen, Andy. I didn't start this war. Men above my pay grade who are much smarter than me did. I just do as I'm told to do. The responsibility falls on their shoulders. They're the ones who gave one-time civilians like me weapons that kill. Go talk to them.
When you got back, you're always checking to see if everybody was back. And then they'd say, well, no, so-and-so isn't back. And after a while, you knew if he wasn't back in an hour or two, he didn't have enough fuel. Or maybe it found out they'd landed in France, or which was fair enough, or in some other airport. But other times they're just missing, and it'd take a day or two to find they were either dead or prisoners of war. But it was always an anxious time waiting to see that every crew came in after you got back. So
We had 14 aircraft. Maximum effort was what we had to send every night. And our maximum effort was 14 aircraft. And out of that 14, there was always one that never came back. And we had to do 30 trips. So your chances of getting through 30 weren't very good. So after you'd done about 14, you'd survived about 100%. And your chances after that, you were way above the average. We were very, very lucky. And I think to survive, I think it was about 95% luck and 5% skill.
The Bomber Command's losses were terrible, terrible. Who were being lost were really young guys, well-educated, and a great drain on the country that they should be lost like that. But they were, and looking at that way, the bombing can't be looked at as being in vain.
We had about 10,000 young Canadians, average age of about 22, that were killed in Bomber Command. So it was pretty rough. I think we suffered the highest losses of anybody in the war.
At the end of the war, the head of Fighter Command in England was decorated by the Queen, but the head of Bomber Command wasn't. That was, I think, because of the bombing that he was doing, Air Vice Marshal Harris. His idea was that he could shorten the war, or maybe finish the war, through bombing, because to do it on the ground would take maybe much longer and cost many more lives. Of course, a lot of people use the view that the Germans bombed England and we were justified in bombing them back, sort of. I don't know whether that's right or not, but they did a lot of havoc in England in their bombing. They bombed a lot of civilians, killed a lot of civilians.